oh my gosh, was yours changed? Mine was changed. Like, I was like, what is going on? And I look, and apparently the scores were now changed.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ryan Reflects. My name is Dr. Ryan Corte, and today's episode, I'm excited to talk to a fourth-year optometry student who is doing an incredible job, not only going through his optometric journey, but in educating the current and future optometrists of the world. And so, Joshua Reese, welcome to the show, bud.
Hey, it's good to meet you. It's kind of a surreal moment. I've been watching the podcast, so to be on, it's a little intimidating. Not gonna lie.
Well, and I know you go by Josh, and the reality is I never want people to feel intimidated when they jump on the show. But what I've absolutely loved about you is just all that you're doing to educate pre-optometry students, optometry students, and then even getting out into what does it look like as you embark on fourth year beyond. But before we dive into all of that, for those who don't know you, Josh, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, I've got a little bit of a practice at this because I'm applying to residencies right now. So I'm from
Okay.
Washington State. I'm at the Arizona College of Optometry, currently a fourth year, and in the application process for residencies. So if you're a residency director, hit me up. But I went to undergrad at BYU, and then there I was optometry club president. And kind of how I started my optometry journey was I hated blood, I hated guts. I was thinking of going into medicine, and I just couldn't do it. So I gave up, was searching around for other careers. And around that same time, I went to the eye doctor for the first time. So,
Oh.
I was one of those people who, didn't know what optometrists were at all. And then I got into an America's Best, and I got out and I said, there's no blood, there's no guts. That sounds like something I could do. So I looked into optometry, kind of fell in love. I actually ended up working as an optician and then a vision therapist before school. So really what got me through school was kind of the vision therapy, neuro rehab, and low vision sort of thing. So that's kind of what I'm passionate about right now. And that's kind of my journey, if that answered your question.
No, it 100% does. Well, let's take a step back. So no blood, no guts, and you quickly identified that we're not dealing with open wounds in the vast majority of cases. And
Yeah,
if we have a
sometimes actually.
yeah, if you have a laceration and it needs some kind of surgical fix up, you're going to refer that out, right? That's outside of our scope. But the reality is, we identify blood inside the eye. We have all sorts of issues from a hyphema that can present and all the way to any kind of retinopathy or just vitreal heme, all sorts of chaos that can happen in the eye, but it's not actually coming out at you. So how have you navigated some of those bloody moments?
Well, honestly, I really had no idea the amount of blood and guts that there would be in optometry school, or else maybe I wouldn't have done it. But, cutting open cadavers in school and, doing injections, that's really not my thing. But, I pushed through because I really do want to help, the vision therapy patients and stuff like that. So it's really a sad necessary, but one of my rotations was at an IHS where there was a lot of diabetes, a lot more
Oh
blood
yeah.
than I would like to see. But it's definitely still rewarding helping people with the blood and gut stuff because that stuff's important too.
Yeah, you probably didn't even realize how much of a preventative part of the healthcare system we really truly are in identifying those things. But you got your first eye exam, and then you went and got a job as an optician shortly after. What did that look like?
Hopefully the doctors that I worked for aren't watching. Not just kidding. But I just thought I want as much exposure in the field as I could get because I
Hmm.
really wanted to know if it was for me. I didn't want to commit down a path that I wasn't sure about, especially
Sure.
because I had just heard of optometry when I was 20. I had no context of what this was. I had, one of those 15-minute America's Best exams, and I had no idea the scope of optometry. So I just, through my pre-optometry program or the optometry club at my school, there was some job postings that a lot of local doctors would reach out to the pre-optometry club and say, hey, someone's looking for a job. We have an optician or a technician. And so I just reached out to one of those postings and ended up getting denied the position.
Oh
And I
no.
was super sad. And then later on, they were like, "Hey, we're hiring another optician. Consider reapplying." So I reapplied and I ended up getting the job as an optician. But I actually kind of fell out of love with optometry a little bit while I was working as an optician. It wasn't the busiest practice. It was kind of up and coming. We didn't have a ton of traffic yet. And so, there wasn't a lot of patients that I was helping, and I just felt bored as an optician, which, that was really, looking back, it was that practice. But at the time, it was really an existential crisis for me. Uh,
Sure.
but I was already in too deep. I was the optometry club president at that point, and I ended up organizing a trip to go shadow a pediatric optometrist who did vision therapy. And I just thought, whoa, this is optometry? We can do this too. And that really made me fall back in love with optometry and realizing the extent of what we did. And so, I ended up getting a job there instead. But it was a really good experience to help open my eyes again.
Well, a couple things about that part of your story that I love. One, you went into a practice and sometimes it takes a while for a practice, depending on where they're at in their life cycle, to have that patient volume where it is like, you get there, the day goes by and wow, that just a blink of an eye, right? And then there's practices that are just a few years out and they're just waiting for every single patient to come through the door to give themselves that opportunity to build their patient base, but also to continue to get that word of mouth out there and serve the general eye health and vision care needs of people in the community. But what I also like about that is you were in more of a refractive position and you identify that there's more than one way to practice optometry with vision therapy. And then obviously going down the lines now of wanting to get into neurorehabilitation and binocular vision. Just there's a lot of different ways to practice as an optometrist, a lot of subspecialties. And so for anybody who's listening and may not have just that interest right off the bat with a certain area within optometry, do what Josh did, right? Like explore further. And so I absolutely love that. And so my assumption is as you explore residency options, is this all neuro rehab and VT? Is that kind of the pathway you're going down? Or are you opening up doors to other different residencies?
I'm always open to everything, but right now, kind of my passion that's gotten me this far has been
Yeah.
vision therapy, neuro rehab, uh, and more of the private practice setting is where I want to be. And so when you open up your OR match or the residency match, you get
Mm-hmm.
10 credits or 10 places to apply unless you want to apply to more. It costs more. So I ended up applying to 10 different residencies all around vision therapy, neuro rehab, a little bit of low vision. Some of them are schools, most of them are private practice. So I'm putting out some feelers and seeing
Yeah.
which ones feel the best.
And why not? And
Mm-hmm.
you're giving yourself that opportunity, and that light bulb may go off during one of those interviews. You were like, "Hey, I didn't realize how much I would want to go down this particular pathway. Maybe it's a private practice and they do more specialty contact lenses or
Mm-hmm.
even primary eye care, but then there's a nice mix of ocular disease and pediatrics. And so wherever you land, I have a strong inclination you're going to enjoy that experience. But
You're
you
too
also have
kind.
taken no, I mean, listen, optometry is a great profession. And so I'm a pro optometry guy. And I do believe that you're going to land somewhere that, if you put in the time, energy, and effort, it's going to work out for you. But you have identified early on in your career, and I think you kind of got into more, was it TikTok, Instagram, YouTube? But you identified that you like making social media content and you like doing so to educate pre-optometry and optometry students. Walk me through that journey. What has that been like, and how did you get started?
Well, I'm flattered that you've heard of me. It's a pretty small channel because I'm kind of making content for pre-optometry students and optometry students to a lesser extent. But funny background, I was just walking my dog one day, just waiting for her to go to the bathroom. And I just thought, I'm wasting my time. And so I thought, is there something I could do while my dog is waiting to go to the bathroom instead of just, doom scrolling? And so I just thought, let me record a video because I had just taken the OAT. And so my
Okay.
first video is like my experience taking the OAT, and it's super, it's like, oh, what's up, YouTube? I'm just here walking my dog, and my OAT went well, and so it's very cringe. The video's still up, so you could probably still find it, but it kind of got better, hopefully to some extent. But I just realized that nobody's talking about it. When I was looking to take the OAT, there was probably only 4 or 5 videos out there about the OAT, like experiences taking it. I know you're one of the few people who have made videos for optometry students and pre-optometry students. So such an underserved community. And it's such a big experience for me to realize in the comments how many people it really helped my poor quality, low budget videos of how my experience has really helped, at this point, thousands of people have seen my videos, even though, it's not the biggest, Mr. Beast video. It still helps people. So I keep doing it. It's been very rewarding. And to a lesser extent, I've gotten into some TikTok, some Instagram, but YouTube is what I like.
Yeah, you're having fun with it, but content is king, right, Josh? So you said it. There isn't a ton of information out there, and maybe from different vantage points, right? So, you and I were just chatting before I hit record, and, I'm probably 10, 15 years older than you. I graduated in 2012. And so my insight on what the OAT was like, well, it's a little bit dated, and my insight in my optometric journey, yeah, it's evolved over time, but it's always good to get fresh perspective of what's happening right here, right now. And that's what you're giving those students, those pre-optometry students, and anybody who's interested in learning more about the profession. So I commend you on that, and I want you to keep going because I've seen your video content. I think you're doing an excellent job.
You're
And
too
so,
kind.
no, listen, I really do. I believe you're doing an excellent job. So you've gone through school, you're now in your 4th year. And one of the things that we connected on recently was just obviously there's a lot going on in our profession in regards to the National Board of Examiners in Optometry. I think that your class has faced some challenges. I think there's been some Part 3 delays. There were some Part 2 score updates that some of your classmates have seen that they passed and then all of a sudden they failed, or maybe vice versa. Walk me through what's going on. Like, what are you seeing kind of boots on the ground as an optometry student?
Well, that's a loaded question because everything's happened. I don't even know where to start.
Let's start with Part 3 then, because I think part 3 was the one that was in August, right? And there was a delay. Is that my understanding?
Yeah. So I actually just had this weekend a doctor talk to me saying, "Oh, I hope that you guys didn't have to deal with any of the NBEO shenanigans." And I said, "Nope, it's all me. I've been through them all." So Part 3, they just changed, for those of you who don't know, to a new format. So when you took Part 3 even 1 year ago, it's completely different now. So instead of doing one long style exam where you go through all of your clinical skills, it's 12 mini exams and only 2 of them are clinical skills. The rest are just patient encounters, diagnosis, treatment, Part 2 style encounters. And so it's brand new. It's called PEPS, and they don't have any scores like standards yet. And so the first, from August to like October, they said you'll get your scores in December. And then after that, the regular 6 weeks or however long they take to release the scores. And so I took mine in the first batch in August,
Okay.
and I was told that it would come back in December. And just, I'm a fan of full transparency, not trying to throw anyone under the rug here. But I got an email at the beginning of December saying, "Hey, remember how we said it would come out in December? It's actually going to come out the last possible week of December. So that week before winter break." And then I got an email that last possible day in winter break saying, "Your score has been withheld. Call this number to talk to us." And I said, "Okay." I
Yeah.
screenshotted the email and sent it to my wife. And I was like, looks like they got delayed again, because I didn't even read it. I was in the clinic. I just screenshotted it, sent it, and kept seeing patients. And she said, "Oh my gosh, did you call the number? What did they say?" And I said, "Oh, I didn't even read the email." but that's what it said. Your score is being withheld. Call this number. So I called. It ended up being like they said, can you meet with us like this day in January? And I said, oh my gosh, oh, what did I do? And then I
Sure.
met with them that day in January, and it turned out not to even be the NBEO, but some third party investigation company that they hire to just like snuff stuff out, or like it was less about like how my experience was and like regular, industry R&D, like let's make this exam better. And the
Yeah.
questions were more like, you know, well, like who have you talked to about the exam? Have you shared about it on social media? You know, have you, posted about it in Reddit on what other Instagram? Like they went through all of the social media platforms you could share about it and asked how we had shared about it and if we had talked to anyone. I think, NBEO, if you know them, they're always concerned, overly concerned, in my opinion, about people cheating. I think it happens a lot less than they think it does. But it was really just kind of, grilling the students to see how much cheating is going on or something like that. And then after that meeting, they released my score, I think, almost a week later. So I took it in August and got it back in January. So I just barely got it back like 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer.
Yeah, when we're recording this in early
Oh
February.
yeah,
So then
sorry.
for no, no, honestly, so then and you mentioned your aspirations for residency. It's kind of hard to go through that process not knowing your scores. How has that impacted that?
Yeah, well, even after I got my score, it's not on the snapshot of how you like your NBEO score sheet that you download and send to residencies. Part three, the new part three is not even on that. So
Oh, okay.
I have to email all the residencies separately about the new part three. And
Because
a
they're
lot
still
of the
figuring it out too,
residencies,
right?
yeah, a
They're
lot
still
of the
figuring it out.
residencies don't know what to do with it. They're like,
Sure.
you failed this section, but passed this section. Like, I think that's okay, So we're all figuring it out. But it did throw a wrench in my residency plans because the reason I took it in August was to have it back by the time I applied. But I got it back after I had already submitted all of my applications. So, yeah.
Well, in part three, it was my understanding that the tweak and update to part three was more for logical based, just going through the SOAP format and more real life scenarios. Anytime that there's a change, I was actually part of the first round of part three administrations that happened in Charlotte, North Carolina. So
Oh,
prior to
wow.
my year, so prior to my year, everybody had it a little differently. And there were some hiccups even when I took mine. And fortunately for me, it was during the injection skill. And so they just were like, well, we're going to fix it. And if you want to retake it. And, at that time, I decided not to. But I can imagine, though, as a fourth year student that took it in August, and I'm assuming there was a couple different administrations since then that they withheld all those scores because they were worried about people sharing information or there was something posted online and they were trying to get to the bottom of it. But how did it feel to have to wait that long? And what are you hearing from some of your classmates? Like what is the general sentiment?
Yeah. I'm more chill, I would say,
Yeah.
self-proclaimed chill guy. But because it was kind of random, the people they selected to have their scores withheld. And so
Yeah,
I
it's
had
scary.
people in my class who, are some of the highest performing people having their scores withheld, and they're high stress individuals. And so they were freaking out about it, emailing everyone they could, really
Sure.
trying to get to the bottom of it because there wasn't a lot of transparency as to why. Even now, it's still confusing looking back.
Sure.
And so it really just felt like we were in the dark for weeks with our scores dangling above our heads, like it just felt like there was nothing really we could do. And a lot of people were anxious and had a hard time even going to clinic and seeing patients, knowing that they don't know if they're going to pass part three. They don't know if they're getting in trouble. There was no communication as to what it was for.
And this went over the holiday season, so you have this
Yeah.
self proclaimed chill, enjoying maybe some holiday time with the family. But I can imagine there were a number of people that had a hard time just even going home for the holidays and enjoying pretty much the end of the year and then start of 2025. Whew, that's
Yeah.
rough. That's rough. You know anybody who still had their information withheld from that, or is everything pretty much out now and they're kind of working towards next steps, whether they pass and failed?
I know a lot of people were loud online about their scores
Yeah.
being withheld in the first place, and I haven't
Yeah.
heard anything since then. So I can
Okay.
imagine everyone's kind of got their scores back and they're not being withheld anymore. But I could be
Yeah.
wrong. I think everyone ended up getting their scores back.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a tricky situation for optometry as a profession because to have something like the NBEO that is obviously there and designed to protect the public, to make sure that you reach competency, and it's really to ensure their safety. However, the part 3 situation has caused some distrust, and then of course the part 2 situation that just happened in January. Walk me through that. What happened there, or at least from
Yeah,
your vantage point?
it was crazy because right after I got my score for part 3, the next week I was going to get my score for part 2. And so I was all, excited, ready, no more drama. We're going to get
Mm-hmm.
my score back for part 2. And it was in clinic the Friday it was going to come out. And I got an email at like 1 p.m. my time in
Mm-hmm.
Arizona, like saying, hey, your score's ready.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yippee. I had just barely about to finish lunch, screenshotted my scores, downloaded them, sent them all to my residencies. I passed.
Oh,
Yippee. My score is now sent out to my residencies. My applications are officially submitted.
I didn't
And
even think about
then,
that.
and then 2 hours later, about 2.5 hours later, I was in the gym back home from clinic,
Mm-hmm.
and group chat that I have with like 2 or 3 of my optometry friends were like, oh my gosh, was yours changed? Mine was changed. Like, I was like, what is going on? And I look, and apparently the scores were now changed. Now, NBEO had sent out emails about it, but my class didn't get any emails. It was a class below us that got emails that the scores were changed and updated. And so everyone in my class was super confused. I think they eventually got email correspondence, but I do
Okay.
know a couple of people, my score went down by 21 points. A couple of people's scores went up by a couple of points, but most people's
Oh,
scores decreased dramatically. I don't know if it was a spreadsheet error or, they clicked a couple of wrong buttons or something, but I know people who passed TMOD and then failed TMOD after. I know people who passed overall and then failed after. One of my best friends in optometry, she passed TMOD, sent out her applications to all of her residencies saying, hey, I passed, then came back that she failed it and had to email back again all of her residencies saying, hey, actually, I failed it. And so, tricky situation.
well, Josh, it's when you said that in the middle, I was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't even think about people that were applying for residencies and like instantaneously were like, I've been waiting for this information and I need to get it out there as quickly as possible. Because I can imagine just sharing it like with your wife, right? Screenshotting it and then having to go back and say, for an instance, if you passed originally and then you ended up failing, how debilitating that can be. But for individuals that had experienced that, like for example, one of your best friends in optometry school, what have they shared with you? Like, where's their headspace right now?
Uh, well, luckily, NBEO came out with like a little apology saying that you'll be able to retake TMOD at no cost or retake the exam at no cost. So they're
Yeah,
feeling a little better now, but
sure.
Headspace wasn't great. There's been a lot of things said online. I'm sure you've seen some of them.
Yes, I
Some
have.
even calling for, NBEO being dissolved, for state organizations to not accept NBEO exams anymore. You know, uh, there's hopefully some solutions out there. And if it comes to that, maybe we have to. But, it really, as the AOA said in their statement, it's an opportunity for NBEO to put the transparency out there that they always claim to have. So hopefully they'll be able to respond well.
Yeah, I've read through a lot of the comments on Facebook and a lot of the different groups that are out there, and it is hard to read. It's hard to read just to feel and kind of feel the emotions that, and a lot of them are anonymous posts, but the emotions that students are going through, if I could provide a little bit of optimism, challenges, we're all going to face them, right? And whether it's the NBEO, whether it's, you weren't able to pass certain classes during undergrad or optometry school, and then you get out into clinical practice and maybe you're just having a hard time adjusting to clinic, or you're not happy with your first or second job. There's always going to be challenges in life. And I agree. I feel that this is a huge opportunity for the NBEO, and I do think that they want to get it right. I genuinely like to believe that, despite a lot of the issues and a lot of the mistakes that have transpired in the past, I do believe that they're working to do that. But if you're an optometry student and you're in a position where you're just feeling really frustrated, don't give up. Right? Don't give up. Hang in there. Know that better days are ahead. I know that there's people that are out there talking, let's do a class action lawsuit, or let's try to, go around them. The truth of the matter is, to practice optometry in the United States, you have to pass NBEO Part 1, 2, and 3. And then, of course, you have to go to the state that you practice in. And you got to get licensed in that state. That's just how it's structured. That's the legislative profession that we're in. But all that being said, Josh, what do you think the NBEO could do to improve transparency, restore faith amongst students, optometrists? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, thanks for thinking of me, Ryan, because I would love to be the chair of NBEO and have all of these problems to solve. Not just kidding. I'd be the perfect person. Put me in. No, but I was thinking, or another doctor and I were talking about how it's kind of the perfect storm right now for anxiety amongst optometry students, where we've kind of gone through school with COVID. Mm-hmm. It's affected our learning. It's affected, being able to actually learn the info. We're at a time where NBEO exams, and I've taken them, they seem as irrelevant as ever. It just doesn't seem clinically relevant. A lot of times with Part 1 and Part 2 questions, it just seems a little too hard, a little too irrelevant for clinical practice. And Part 3, I thought was pretty good. I like the new Part 3, even though, I failed a section. But, so they're going in a good direction. It's just kind of the perfect storm of errors made on their part. Students during COVID, scores are dropping. And so I think just as we ride the wave out, it'll just naturally get better after the storm. But I think the number one step they could do is be more transparent, and just more communication to the students, acknowledging the hard time that they've had to go through, with the generational pandemic that, they had to have during school. But, all that being said, I just think that the transparency would help. And then the next steps, of course, that they did now with the new Part 3 is hopefully update Part 1 and Part 2, make them more clinically relevant, make them more affordable. It's just, there's hard, it's up, if you look at other professions, you look at optometry really has to jump over a couple of more expensive hurdles than other professions. But the wave will ride out. Optometry students, don't worry. Things are going to get better. Apparently Josh Reese is going to fix all your problems on the NBEO board, but the wave will ride out.
Hey, listen, those are volunteer positions. So that, it's an opportunity for you, Josh, once you get your foot out there. But I have a couple of follow-up questions on that. So you asked for transparency. Mm-hmm. What does that look like? I mean, I haven't taken the exam in years, and, I've read through the website. I talk to students, but do you think it would be advantageous to have almost student focus groups? I know that they've done something like this in the past, but continue to have those kind of focus groups to learn how to provide better transparency, or what are you looking for in regard to transparency for this test?
I think when I said transparency, I was mostly thinking of in regards to the errors that have happened with Part 3 and Part 2. I think a lot of optometry students are just kind of waiting for answers. And it could be as simple as admitting, we made a spreadsheet error. I think that would go a long way for the students to be like, oh, whew, it was just a spreadsheet error. There was no maliciousness, because it feels malicious. A lot of it feels malicious, even though in the back of our minds, we know it's not. but that's how it
Yeah.
feels. And so the transparency I would call for is really in those mistakes that have been made with part 3 and part 2. But you're right about the transparency in the focus groups and stuff, trying to make it a better experience for students. I know doctors like to say they had it hard, so the new generation should have it hard too. But I think the new generation also has an expanded scope that they need to be tested on too, that the older generation weren't tested on. And so as it just feels like the weight on the new ODs, it just feels like a little much going through it. I don't know.
No,
Hopefully that answered your question. I felt like I
it
was
did from
rambling.
No, it did from two different angles. Obviously transparency on data and how it's put together, and they have to have formulas, they have to have, statistical analysis and bell curves, and those kind of things are important for them to determine who passes and who fails, and they have to have some kind of benchmark to protect the public. But on the other end, I was wondering from a transparency of information into, I think I've read some things about, I don't know how I could improve in my scores, or I don't know what sections I'm struggling on versus what sections I'm succeeding on. And again, I haven't taken the test in a while. Is that something that you're hearing as well, or?
I mean, I've heard it all, right? There's a lot of optometry students with a lot of opinions on how it could be better, and I don't know which solutions are the right ones. But
Mm-hmm.
you're right about it kind of feeling vague, where you don't know what you need to do to improve. Uh, like when you're taking the exam, you can be like, oh yeah, if I knew it was like this, if I knew there were questions like this, I could have
Yeah.
totally prepared for it. But it's so vague to study for. Their information's so broad that you really don't know in what direction to go to. And then when you're
Yeah.
taking the exam, like thankfully, I passed and I was able to go, oh yeah, I know that. I know that. But I know students who are very, very bright, smarter than me in school, smarter than me in clinic, who failed the exams because their effort was, randomly focused in the wrong things. Even though they were clinically important things, they still weren't, relevant enough to get them to pass boards.
What about, the schools and different prep courses that you can take through all, I mean, there's KMK and there's a bunch of them. Like, what responsibility do you feel that those organizations, particularly the schools, what responsibility should they have for just getting students ready and prepared? Like, what are you hearing?
Yeah, kind of stepping back a little bit. I was talking with someone that's on the AOA membership committee saying,
Okay.
what can we do to have more students want to be members of the AOA and more new grads want to give back to the profession? And my response to that was, why would they want to give back to a profession that feels like there's such a paywall and such, gatekeeping to the profession? Why would they, after they just made it out of school, why would they want to give back if they haven't received anything positive yet? And so, the AOSA I was a part of, you were president of the AOSA, we
Yeah.
try to help
Back in the
students
day,
see
man.
that there's great things about it. And I have thankfully been a part of some of these great things. But if when you're going through it and you don't know there's anything outside of school, it's terrible. So I think optometry schools right now, their success is how many of their students become optometrists, ergo how many pass boards and the percentage rates. And so how can schools even care about getting students involved? How can schools even care about, opening the minds of the students and seeing the modes of practice and teaching things that aren't on boards when they could be teaching more things on boards so that more people pass? And so I think like KMK, I didn't buy it, but I've, used some of the resources and it seems
Yeah.
pretty good. I went through optometry school. It was pretty good. We learned a lot of stuff and a lot of it was on boards, but a lot of boards I never learned in optometry school. I never encountered in a KMK book. I never encountered in OptoPrep. It would just be, kind of bits and pieces that you put together. So that's kind of why I think that if it's something you never learn in optometry school, it's something that KMK doesn't know how to teach, it's something all the other boards prep materials don't know how to teach, that's why I think that some of the part one and part two is just a little irrelevant or not applicable to patient care, which ultimately should be what it's all about.
No, I hear you. I mean, I understand that. I remember taking part one, and a lot of it is didactic knowledge,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always felt that that was something that was, you know, a hoop you had to jump through. And then part two, when I took it, was much more clinically based, and part three was actually providing that care in front of a proctor, and you know, getting your scores back after and being assessed on your abilities. So things have evolved, things have changed. But it sounds like maybe there could be more collaboration between the schools and the NBEO to make sure everybody's on the same page. And so that's something always, you know, again, if there was a student focus group and there was feedback that could be shared, that would be a good one. I've seen a lot of comments about how much the exams have gone up. Is it almost $1,500? Is that what it is for part
I
one?
think it's like
$1,500 for part two?
$1 less than
Okay.
$1,500. Yeah, for all three
Okay.
parts.
Talk to me about that, because you mentioned that that's a huge stressor for students. They're already paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their education, and then you slap on, you know, more money to take these exams. Walk me through that scenario.
I don't know what there is to talk about it other than that's just more expensive than other exams with the lower pass rate of other exams. So a lot of
What
people
other
draw
exams?
conclusions. So as far as dental boards, my dad's a dentist. I'm at Midwestern, there's dental students, and I explain even a little bit of the cost or the preparation
Mm-hmm.
or the pass rates of our board exams compared to theirs. And they're having a fit. They're wanting to protest for me. My dad was like,
Oh wow.
nothing like this would ever happen in dentistry, or the whole board would be dissolved and everyone would be in fits. Now, I'm not saying, that it's, I'm not saying that dental students maybe are a little bit more sensitive than optometry students, but that's a conversation for another day. But, it just some things like this are cheaper and the pass rates are better in other professions. And I don't know where the answer is. I don't know if it's the quality of schools is less because I haven't been in any of the other schools. Haven't gone to dental school, or med school, but I do know that the passing rates are far lower in optometry than they are for board exams in other professions.
So dentistry, you know, osteopathic medicine, MDs, um, you know, PAs, those kind of schools. You're saying?
Yeah, I actually got an ad the other day for step one prep. The hardest exam in all of the world, step one for medical students. And I looked up the passing rate and it's almost 90% for the hardest exam in the whole world. I don't like in optometry school, part one for NBEO was 60 like four last year or 2 years ago. It's just,
Yeah.
there's a big gap there. And I know it's the perfect storm with COVID affecting student learning and, everything, but I can't even remember what we started talking about. I got ranting. Sorry,
No,
Dr. Corte.
we were talking about fees and just the
Oh,
frustration,
yeah.
and you know, the feelings that some of your classmates and some of your peers had, that if they originally passed and then they went to failing, how they felt about having to pay those fees. I can imagine there were some people that originally failed and then they passed, and we're not seeing that information shared all over the internet.
Mm-hmm.
But that's probably, those people are in a much different position. Like, whoa, holy cow, what just happened? You know, so I feel for you guys as somebody who's a huge advocate for the profession. You know, I very much so believe in transparency. I believe that the NBEO will continue to make strides to get it right over time, despite some of the challenges, despite some of the historical issues that maybe optometrists and optometry students have experienced. Um, we do have other challenges though, right? In our profession, it's
That's
getting
true.
more people to coming into the profession, because right now the applicant ratio is one optometry student for every one seat, and there's new schools opening up, right? And so if we don't have a strong applicant pool over time, there may be people that slide through that. Unfortunately, you know, it is a business to have an optometry school that maybe just aren't in the best position to make it all the way through and pass boards. Has anybody talked to you guys about that, or like is that something that comes up in conversation with some of your classmates?
Yeah, I not necessarily with classmates. I talked to more doctors about this, but
Yeah.
that just how I was talking about how the NBEO board is affecting whether or not students want to join the AOA. It also massively affects whether or not students want to go into optometry school at all. Because I make YouTube videos and content for pre-optometry students, I
Yeah.
sometimes do some coaching with them, answer a lot of questions. And I've known more than a handful of students who have decided not to go to optometry school because of NBEO and the pass rates and the pay and just how expensive it is now. And so I'm not saying that if all of that went down, we'd get a much more optometrists, much more applicants, but I do think it's a part of the equation. Now, another part is people like us need to make more content to get more people excited about optometry because it is wonderful. I'm having a
Yeah.
great time. The possibility
And
of
you're
the
not even
world
out
out
yet.
there is
Yeah.
amazing,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it is kind of, a flaming hoop you have to jump through. And so it's hard not to talk about it.
Well, Josh, I really appreciate you taking some time just to chat with me. Obviously I'm midway through my career, give take. I'd say maybe the
You're
first
still
third.
young.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, right. But I've been out for a while, right? 2012. And I just want to thank you. I'm grateful for all that you're doing. Keep doing it because we need to continue to have strong, positive voices. Yes, of course, sharing some of the downsides or challenges you're facing, but really enlightening those out in the community and those in optometry school or pre-optometry school or just around undergrad, exploring options so that they better understand our profession. And as much as we face hurdles and trials and tribulations as optometrists, there are a lot of great reasons to become an optometrist and how we serve patients' eye health and vision care needs and really how it's a strong profession at large. So thank you so much for your time, energy, and efforts today. Where can people connect with you? What's the best way for them to do so?
I think I tried to have all of my social medias and stuff as Josh Reese Optometry. So I'm, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, if that's, if your state or if your country still lets you download that. But, don't just follow me, follow all of the optometry influencers out there because we need more of you. And if you're listening to this, create more content because we really do need more people sharing about how great optometry is. And, it's really given me life, as cheesy as that, ASCO campaign is, optometry gives me life. It's true. It really does keep me moving forward and brings me joy every day.
Wonderful. Well, hey, everybody who's listening, make sure to check out Josh on social, keep doing what you're doing, and stay tuned for my next podcast where we can reflect and grow stronger together.